start just a second. Everybody just making sure our live stream's going. Oh yeah, it looks like it's fine. Yay. Very good. Okay. We are going to keep going. So yeah. Welcome everybody to the latest monthly installment of the EFF Austin Meetup. My name is Kevin Welch. I'm the current president of the board at EFF Austin. I see old and new faces. Welcome all. For those of you who are like, what is EFF Austin? Well, as you might guess from the name, we're an Austin-based digital celebrities organization. We do a lot of work with Electronic Frontier Foundation, who you may have heard of. They're the nation's oldest and largest digital celebrities advocacy group based in San Francisco, going on 35 years at this point. They fight to protect your rights in emerging technological spaces, especially your First Amendment right to free speech and expression and your Fourth Amendment implicit right to privacy. They advocate on all sorts of important issues where technology and legal policy intersect, things like net neutrality, embedded encryption, Section 230 of the CDA, currently laws like age verification laws, and all sorts of fun stuff trying to protect your rights online and elsewhere. So they've been around a long time. They do good work. I encourage you to go online and learn more about them if you want to learn more about these issues and causes in general. As you might gather, so we've been around almost as long as them, since the early 90s as well, because a lot of the legal cases that led to the founding of the EFF happened with some lawyers and technologists here in Austin at the time. Happy to chat with me later if you want to learn more about the history. But we are part of a network known as the EFA, which is about 100 digital celebrities groups all around the United States. It's not chapters-based. We don't have any formal legal affiliations with each other, but we all advocate on similar issues at the city and state level. We are the one of the only groups, though, not only based in Austin, but based in Texas as well, although our fellow friends at Open Austin, who Aslan is actually a board member of, are also EFA members. Anyway, our mandate is primarily educational. It mostly takes the form of trying to educate the public on emerging technology and also just digital culture in general. Happens the second Tuesday of every month here at Kappa Factory, usually downstairs, though we are up here this month. I'm happy to see most people manage to make the shift and find us. Second Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. We're always looking for interesting speakers to speak on law, technology, culture, society, and even digital art. You know, we do the whole gamut basically. We have a few fun talks coming up next month, especially for those of you who are interested in the social and ethical implications of AI. I strongly encourage you to come to our final talk of the year because we have about as big an expert in the field as you can find practically, unless I was having Jan Wakun or Jeffrey Hinton come in. We're going to have, speaking to us remotely, Dr. Benjamin Kuipers, a former mentor of mine. He is on a friend basis with Jeffrey Hinton. He's been working in the AI space for, at this point, 35 years. Nobody knows more about it than almost anybody on the planet. And he's going to be talking to us about AI and ethics. So should not be a controversial talk at all. I strongly encourage you to come out to hear from a real expert in the field who's thought probably far more deeply about these issues than any of us have. So strongly encourage you to come check that out with us. We also tentatively next year for January, we're going to be hearing remotely from representatives from SASE, which is Southerners Against Surveillance something infrastructure, right? Systems infrastructure, something like that. But they do a lot of good research on finding out what various municipalities throughout the South, what they may have bought in terms of surveillance technologies. And they've done some FOIA requests to learn about some interesting technologies that our own police department is using that nobody knew about. So we're going to learn about how they're using tools like Callio and other things to monitor you. So we have a couple fun ones coming up over the next few months. Encourage you to come check those out. We also generally usually have a couple parties a year, usually one during the holidays and usually one around South by Southwest. Tentatively have a holiday party coming up sometime in December. Stay tuned for news about that. It's always just a good time to come out and meet your fellow geeks and activists in a more casual setting. And then finally, believe it or not, we are actually activists, and we do quite a bit on that front, mostly at the city level, but occasionally at the state level. In the last couple of years at the state level, we testified on a number of bills and gave input on what ultimately both became Texas's big data privacy law and Texas's big AI regulation law, TREGA. While many of our recommendations did not make it into either law, we were still happy to give our thoughts and advocate for the little guy in both bills. But locally, we've mainly been involved in, being kind of watchdogs and a lot of potential surveillance initiatives at City Hall. We were one of the first groups in town about 4 or 5 years ago to really start sounding the alarm on what are called ALPRs, or automated license plate readers. We're actually happy to report that we, as a founding member of the No ALPRs Coalition, which is composed of about 30 civic activist groups all around the Austin area, we're happy to report that earlier this year we actually got the Austin City Council to discontinue its one-year pilot program with Flock. There are not currently ALPRs being used in Austin. In fact, actually, we just recently learned the cameras were actually taken down, which means the odds they will come back are much lower now. So if these issues sort of excite you, I encourage you to get involved or more. You can go to noalprs.org. There have been other initiatives we've been involved in as well. There was proposed park surveillance with live view technologies that we and certain YouTube activists like Louis Rossman helped rally opposition to. We also have been scrutinizing just technology contracts with the city in general. There was a potential contract with Valkyrie AI that was going to potentially be given very sensitive citizen data with absolutely no oversight on what they were going to do with it. We're happy that's been put on indefinite hold as well. So yeah, basically that's a little bit about what we do. We encourage you to chat with us more and get involved. We're very much citizen driven. There's no formal membership. We do what you want us to do. So I encourage you to chat more about that. That's a little rundown of what we got working on right now. So yeah, I will, now that I rambled on for a little bit, I'm going to introduce this month's speaker and hand things over to him. As I said, we, in addition to the activism, just try to make space for interesting stuff in digital culture. And, as I said, next month we're going to be having a luminary AI talk to us about the ethics of AI. And, I feel like many people, at least of our persuasion in this space, are dismayed by both the dominant narratives about AI. The it's purely going to save us narrative and the it's purely going to doom us narrative. We tend to believe the truth is somewhere in the middle. But so I thought it'd be fun. Let's highlight something actually really neat that somebody did with AI that frankly would not have been possible without this technology. So our speaker tonight, Aslan, as I said, he's been a friend of EFF Austin for many years. He's advocated on tech worker and union rights. He also does a lot of stuff for civic activism and hacktivism with Open Austin as a board member, and he's just also a pretty interesting artist, designer, and all-around interesting dude. Well, Aslan decided that he was dissatisfied with many of the choices of most major modern programming languages. And despite having no formal training in programming language design, he is actually, with the help of an LLM to guide him, has made a working interpretive programming language called Enzo, which I think is just incredible and fascinating. Whether or not, and he'd be the first to tell you, it's necessarily ready for any kind of production-grade prime time, I still think that is a remarkable thing that somebody not trained was able to do with this new technology. So I wanted Aslan to come talk to us about why he did this and just a bit about his process. So yeah, without further ado, Aslan's going to tell us about Enzo.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, hey everybody. So I'm going to be talking about Enzo, and Kevin has already given a little bit of an introduction, but let me kind of get us set up with the structure. I'm going to start by talking about why I designed Enzo. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the theory of design that went into it. Then I have an interactive tutorial, so if you have your computer with you, you can actually pull it out and there'll be a URL and you can go do the interactive tutorial, so Python notebook hosted on Google Colab. And then there's implementation, which I'm going to cover kind of briefly, and then I'll go into tech grades, which will be also pretty brief. So let's begin. So I'm going to explain why I decided to design Enzo. So basically, 2018 to 2020, I was working as a UX designer, but was also trying to learn code. And so as I was learning code, I would often be frustrated with certain aspects of syntax aesthetic. So these are just like personal, pet peeves or whatever, just things I thought were weird or kind of confusing. So I started this document where I started kind of sketching out syntax ideas. I'd done a little bit of reading about things like crafting interpreters and other like kind of basic idea of what an abstract syntax tree was and like how the interpretation, how interpreters work, how languages work, parsing, etc. But I also never intended to implement this. It was just sort of like a way of venting and a place to be kind of creative. I think it actually makes a lot of sense that coming from UX design to programming, I was interested in, I approach this as a UX designer, which is very much like thinking about code as a user interface. So that's, the title of the talk tonight, but I think it's actually very literally, code is an interface. The way you design syntax is also a user interface design challenge, right? So, so I thought that was interesting. Didn't really go anywhere. Occasionally when I was taking like a course online between, outside of work, I would update the document. But in 2025, when I was really trying to learn more programming again, I had this moment where I was going through a tutorial, and the teacher just basically started using destructuring in a Vue.js project, and I really didn't get. I was like, oh, I don't know what this guy's doing. I don't know what this new syntax is. So I asked ChatGPT to explain JS destructuring, but then I gave it the Enzo design document I've been making and said, do this in the style of Enzo. And that process actually helped me understand destructuring better. And so this accelerated kind of creative expression in terms of interest in syntax design, but also was being used primarily as a learning tool. So that's one of the things I really want to emphasize about Enzo is that this is a learning and expressive tool. This is not a product. It does not solve any problems. It only creates new ones. Again, still was working on this stuff, but was not intending to implement it. But then 2 months ago or something, we lost power during a hailstorm. So I was like, what the hell, I'll just try it. So it did, and it worked. And I think something important to think about with this stuff is that programming languages seem to be purely objective, technical mathematical objects. We think of things like objective. But they're actually expressive. And this is really similar to, I think, the way that J.R.R. Tolkien approached language. J.R.R. Tolkien, very famous, he did Lord of the Rings, etc. But the whole reason, the thing that started before Lord of the Rings is he made his own languages. And he was doing this as an expression of his opinions about linguistics and about words and how languages form in their grammar. And this is kind of, I think you can think of as in terms of human languages, constructed human languages, conlangs we call them. In terms of conlangs, J.R.R. Tolkien's is an artistic, aesthetic expression versus something like Esperanto, which is trying to solve a problem. Esperanto is another constructed language that was I don't know, 1900s, something like that. It's a blend of all these different languages, and it's trying to solve a problem about how people communicate. Tolkien's stuff is just expressive. So I think that's important because even though I frame myself as being a UX designer, this is not UX research. This is not empirical. I don't make any claims about this, any of these choices being better than any other choices. It's just kind of me doing a thing. I bring that partially because one of the things that got me interested in syntax design was a language called Quorum, which I recommend you check out if you're interested in this kind of stuff. It's a language that's produced using empirical research. It's a research project out of Las Vegas. And I cribbed a lot of stuff from it, but I cribbed a lot of stuff from a lot of stuff. So just worth sharing. All right, so I'm going to start with the theory of design. So, like I said, this is an expressive project, but I still was trying to have some principles and heuristics I used when making this work. The number one heuristic is it's personal intuition as a primary driver. Enzo is an art project. I didn't run user studies or benchmarks. I followed what I felt was clear and readable or interesting. Its design reflects personal taste and curiosity, and I don't claim these choices are better. I think that's always very important. A lot of times when people make languages, they're trying to solve a problem. I am not solving a problem. Okay, number two is favoring non-programmer intuition. So when a choice exists between doing something that's the computer science conventional way of doing things, or doing something that a normal person who doesn't know anything about programming will be more intuitively drawn towards, I try to do the latter. So kind of the guiding question is, would grandma understand it? Three, prioritize the human interface over machine performance. When forced to choose, I favor making the language simple and consistent, and I don't really care about how efficient the parsing is or how much memory it's consuming. It's purely coming from the perspective of what's the thing to a human being. Do not care. The machine has a job to do. So the fourth is reinforce generalizable patterns. So when trying to design different features for the language, I try to have these patterns that they apply in one domain, they apply in another domain. Because when you take a pattern, a design pattern, and you use it across a interface, it decreases the surface of the interface you have to learn. There's like less stuff to remember. And then also by having it in multiple contexts, you reinforce parallel thinking about it. It like enforces structured parallelism. The fifth is no overloading of like symbols or concepts. So a symbol or a keyword or some kind of syntactic structure should have one conceptual job rather than giving multiple meanings to the same symbol, which a lot of times languages will do that just because it's like convention or brevity, or there's all sorts of reasons why some things might be, mean more than one thing. 6 is explicit over implicit, so this is supported by the famous knowledge in the world versus knowledge in the head, a heuristic, which was first articulated by Don Norman in the design of everyday things, which is an important UX text. It's kind of the thing that popularized the term. So if you're interested in design, if you're coming from more of a developer background, I highly recommend checking out that book. It's very interesting. Then there's favor composition over inheritance, which is built from small pieces and snap them together. This is kind of somewhat influenced, I think, by the Unix philosophy of design, which is also worth looking up. Decouple syntax from formatting is the 8th principle or heuristic, and so basically, like, people are going to have different opinions about how stuff should look, like aesthetics. This is like a reflection of my aesthetic sensibility and syntax, but also like I think there should be like a little bit of latitude. So the parser doesn't depend on very strict white space, punctuation, or formatting style stuff. It's very loose where it can be, and it's strict where it has to be. And then the last one is syntactic clarity over annotation. So the goal is to let structure carry the meaning so that the language doesn't have a bunch of boilerplate in it. All right, so if you want to do the tutorial, you can go to this link. It's a HackMD markdown thing, and it has a bunch of links in it. So you might want to go to that link, or take a picture of that link for later, if you want to do other stuff that I'll have on that page.
Do I detect a Mastodon server?
No, it's just HackMD.
Okay.
It's just like a markdown editor.
Got it.
And I'll take a moment to take a picture. Just to let people know, once I have it up, there at the top, there's a little thing, looks like a little play button. You just hit that, and that will do the setup. All these, basically what this is it's a Python notebook that has, like, hooks into the interpreter so that you can, like, run text inside of that notebook. Kind of like, it's another user interface. But, do you think I should wait? Are you still getting it? Like I said, you just hit the little thing for setup, and then we're going to be starting at the section that says Enzo Essentials. And from then on, you'll be able to see more stuff. I'm also, unfortunately, this notebook does not have syntax highlighting in it, so I'll also be showing examples on the screen. Using the interpreter, I was able to make a syntax highlighting text thing for VS Code, so you'll see some of that in a moment. All right, so the first most fundamental concept in Enzo is atoms. In Enzo, you have this concept of an atom. Basically, there are units of value. There are 4 types of atoms: number, text, list, and functions. The core pattern is you have atom values and you have key names, and you can take atom values and bind them to a key name. Everything is basically it's either, well, not everything. Like 90% of the thing is just either a key name that's invoking an atom value or just like a direct atom value. Okay. And so like I've already talked about like text. I mean, I saw the first 4 things. Text and numbers is pretty straightforward. The next is compound atoms. So you have lists. Lists are the only dash structure. They're the one dash structure to rule them all. Lists serve both as maps or dicts, maps/dicts or arrays. So they're just a list of values. That's pretty simple. Those values can be named or not named. This was inspired by Lua. Lua has this concept of tables where you basically have one data structure that can do both, what an array does and what a map does. Even under the hood, though, Lua does actually separate arrays and the map structure. And this is why most languages have a separation between arrays and maps as data structures. It's because you have a lot of optimization. So like arrays are fast to number-based access because they store elements as continuous memory blocks. And then maps are optimized for name based on the method of hashing. For name-based lookup via hashing. So Enzo doesn't care about any of that. Like I said, Enzo only cares about making things simple for humans. So you can see the invocation of list elements is the same whether you're using a name or index. That's another example of like trying to make patterns more generalizable. In most languages, when you access an array, it has one syntax. And if you access something by name, a name value, it is also a different syntax. So in this one, it's just all dot notation. So it's one pattern for everything.
Aslan, this is me being a nerd. What do they actually map to under the hood?
I have no clue.
No clue.
I'll get to that in implementation stuff. I mean, I have some clue, but
yeah, because I'm sort of sitting here going, well, is it going to be fast? Is it going to be O1? Is it going to be fast for named retrieval, random access, or sequential access? Is sort of what I was wondering.
Yeah, well, so I probably should have said this earlier. Also, I had it on the screen, but didn't say it. But so basically, what Enzo is it's just a custom parser and that creates an abstract syntax tree that then gets evaluated into Python code. So this all just runs on Python runtime.
And right there, I'm going, Python's already one of the slowest languages.
Yes.
And you wrote an interpreter on top of
Yes.
Python.
Yeah. As I said, performance is not the point. Okay, so the second compound atom is functions. The core idea is very much inspired by lists, which is that functions are values. You demarcate functions with parentheses. This is basically kind of like, this basically means that like all functions are anonymous, but some anonymous functions get bound to key names. The parameters live inside the body, and because of this structure, this like parentheses only delimited structure, this also replaces all curly bracket like code blocks. So there's not a distinction between like functions, anonymous functions, and a curly braces code block. It's all just, and also there's no grouping. So like most languages, they'll have grouping parentheses, and that parentheses means something else in other contexts. In Enzo, the grouping parentheses are just anonymous functions that are getting evaluated. So you can change the order of like arithmetic using grouping parentheses, but that's also just actually under the hood, just a function.
You're going to hate me again. Do they make closures?
Yes, it does have make closures. Yes. Also, because everything is delimited very clearly through by the delimiters, you have double quotes for text, you have square brackets for lists, and you have parentheses for functions because everything's like that. There's no like type annotation. It's statically typed, but it's all inferred from the delimiters. And that's an example of the whole like concept of trying to have syntactic structure, make things clear instead of having to rely on annotation. And then this also allows, I think kind of an interesting unique behavior, which is that you can have defaults. So as you see these parameters, the type is inferred of what this parameter is going to be, but also because you do this, you can also just cycle 1 there, so you can, that's useful for some data-like use of functions as possible. And I think like this is good contrast to JavaScript, which has like 6 different ways to define functions, and they all mean different things. So here, there's only one way to do it. Rebinding mutation. So the colon means that you're declaring a value, and if you use these 2 rebind functions, one that's going left and one that's going right, that is only for rebinding. So if you make greeting, hello world, things are mutable, but when you mutate things, it's explicit because you're using the rebinding substitute mutation. And that, like directional things, kind of are borrowed from, is borrowed from R. Right, so interpolation is kind of an interesting thing. A lot of languages, at least JavaScript has, like template literals, and that kind of, the old way of doing things as I understand it, like I said, I'm not a very good programmer, is that people used to do concatenation. That's kind of confusing because like you're also doing addition, so like you're kind of overloading stuff a little bit, and then template literals are like very big as I understand it now. And so like I adopted that. There's no concatenation, but then that concept of interpolation is extended out to lists, which I don't know if any other language technically does it this way or has ever, at least doesn't frame it this way. So interpolation is kind of like a spread operator in a list. So that allows you to do prepending, appending, or just like merging together lists. So I think that's kind of neat. And again, that's kind of like the idea of like doing a generalizable pattern. So you could have a language where you have concatenation, and then you have a prepend and append function, but that's multiple patterns for doing similar-ish kind of things. Control flow, there's like 3 different kinds of control flow, which I'll go through. There's normal conditional flow, then there's looping, and then there's also pipeline. So conditional flow is like, pretty straightforward. It's what you think of as like, if, then, else, etc. It's got, in addition to the conditional stuff, you have on the right, instead of switch or case statement, which has like a pretty different, like case switch, whatever, what I'm talking about. Switch statement, like when you have a switch statement with case matching, it has like a very distinct syntax from normal conditional statements in most languages. In Enzo, they're basically pretty similar, and the only real difference is that pure conditional ones have else, and multi-switch ones have otherwise, which I just did because I thought it was interesting. A way to help you visualize that one is a switch and the other is just a traditional if-then.
Like with normal switches, does Enzo have any mechanism to discourage if branching hell when you're using the switch equivalent?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I'd be curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, frankly, I look at this and go, how can we find interesting edge cases with this?
You had a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious. You got if, else, and otherwise are all with a capital letter, but or it's not. Is that on purpose?
Yeah, because or is like linking those. Technically, you can think of those like conditional statements as like it's like a statement. The or thing is it's always dependent on the beginning of the if. So it's like it's part of the same sentence.
It's a coordinated versus subordinated conjunction.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. All right, and then also I don't like ternaries. I think they're weird. I don't understand them. So the one line here is kind of my version. It's like the thing that the ternary is supposed to do. It's like a one line. There's slight differences in syntax when you're doing a single line. Oh yeah.
I was just kind of looking at it. I forgot to ask earlier when you were going through functions, can you use like lambdas like in JavaScript in this language?
Yeah, so everything's an anonymous function. Everything's a lambda, basically.
Which basically you made lists for scheme because everything's anonymous there.
Sort of. For functions it is, but lists, all the conditional statements and stuff are also themselves functions. Conditional. That's the thing to say about control flow, right? I actually should have said that earlier. Is like everything is values, but then those values get glued together with conditional stuff. So it's not like you just have atoms and everything's an atom. It's that you have atoms, and then those atoms get glued together with control flow.
It's not quite as hardcore as saying like lists where they're like one construct does it.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Other stuff to say is just like it's like plain English, trying to be like prose-like. Right. That's pretty much it. The next control structure is called loops. They're loops. They're pretty straightforward. You have end loop and restart loop, which is it's just like break and continue, which is kind of the grandma thing. Like break and continue makes sense if you know computer science or have like that convention in your head, but to a random person, I think end loop and restart loop is more explicit and understandable. Then you also have for loops, while loops, and until loops, and they all just build off of the same like kind of thing. And you could make a for loop with a normal simple loop, but it's nicer to not have to do that.
You may be getting this later, but I did just suddenly think. Per the grand law principle, have you tried somebody who is not you, who is not trained in programming, have you sat them down and tried to see if they could write a program in this?
Probably should.
Then it might be the next step.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd be very interested in doing like actual empirical research on this, but pipeline flow. So if you want to have a string of functions together, like you're taking a transformation, you start with a piece of data and you're doing a series of things, you could just nest everything. But that's like really hard to read because like the most interior one on the first piece of text is like filter, users, active, and then like sort by, and then select. And you're constantly kind of like jumping around. So obviously nesting all your functions is like not super readable, but the way most other languages, I mean a lot of languages, at least JavaScript and other stuff as I understand it, the way they solve this problem is with method chaining. So I don't like method chaining, and the main thing is threefold. The first thing is it's kind of overloaded. If you don't know what method chaining is and you look at that, you're going to assume it's accessing properties because that's what dot notation is used in other places. So also I'll address this, like technically it is still doing property access because what's going on is, and this is why I say the second problem is that it's very implicit, is what's actually happening is you're having users and then you're accessing .filter and then that function returns an object that has the method of sort by, which returns an object that returns the method of select. But that's all kind of implicit and weird, and so I don't like it. And then the third thing is it's not very compositional, which forces everything into like this really strict object hierarchy. And if the object that gets returned doesn't have the right method, then it breaks. So it's kind of fragile. So the way that this is usually solved, or a lot of languages, functional languages solve this with a pipeline operator, which you have an example there on the left, second item.
It's also how Linux solves it for shell scripts.
Yes, yeah, that's the learning a lot of programming by learning how to use stuff with Bash. Like, it was like, oh yeah, pipes make sense. This example is for actually JavaScript, which is has had for like over 5 years in committee this proposal, which I think is actually kind of cool.
But it'll be done in another 5 years.
Yeah, who knows when it's going to get done. So pipelines are really cool because they're more composable. So Enzo adopts this approach, but it also does its own Enzo thing. So takes it further. It's more plain English, I think. So the operators for pipeline are then and this. So you say 100, then this plus 1. What that's doing is taking the value of then, putting it where this is, and then adding 1. And so you can, it's explicit, which the JavaScript example is explicit also, but lots of pipeline syntaxes and languages, they'll do an implicit passing to the first argument of the next function. So this does not do that. This makes it explicit every time. And it's also like kind of human readable. I think it's more useful for manipulation because you can do things like 10, then this plus this, right? So then you can use that thing twice. And it's just like more explicit. So you can see an example there. What it would look like is, users then filter this active, then sort by this last name, then select this ID email. Yeah, so that's pipelines. And let's see, next, this is blueprints, which are kind of like custom types. So basically, you can represent kind of anything with a list, but sometimes you need to set boundaries. You want to say that this kind of thing always looks a certain way. So blueprints are kind of like classes, but they're not exactly. I'm not like super deep into open, into object-oriented kind of stuff. But they have kind of a limited purpose that overlaps with a lot of object-oriented stuff, which is they design a repeatable pattern of data to reuse many times and give the program a semantic grammar for describing the world. So instead of just having like a list that happens to be a goblin or a invoice or a user, you can create a custom type blueprint that is like a specific thing. This allows for consistency and reuse, semantic clarity, and then also constrained variation. And again, it's following the same pattern as everything else is keying and atom value in the same way. This is an atom value. It's like it's not an atom value, but it's a value. And so person is laid out. The blueprint is laid out as this is the fields and methods that the person will have, and then you can create an instance ILS type of person.
Per your general principle of you don't want to overload symbols, why did you feel that using parentheses on class constructors would be overloading and went with brackets?
Sorry, so repeat that question?
So why would it have been inappropriate, like most languages, to use parentheses here? Why did you go with brackets for the class constructor?
There's no class constructor.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it is. It's just like this is the fields that this thing has, and yeah.
Okay.
It does not have so it's like not fully object oriented in that way. I'm not like super deep into object oriented stuff. So.
Okay. It's just to make clear it's a blueprint thing.
Yes. Yeah. It's more like a struct in Rust.
Okay, a struct. Well, those come from C ultimately.
Right. Yeah. Which also C seems like a pain to program. Doing research on this, I was like, wow.
You don't like buffer overflow?
See, I'm too dumb for this stuff. So blueprints can be composed. So you can have like an animal blueprint, a flying blueprint, a swimming blueprint, and then if you want to make a duck, you can say duck, colon animal and flying and swimming. And then if you wanted to make an instance of Donald the duck, you would get these fields. You could customize on instantiation. Donald would come with the fly and swim method. So that's composition. That's trying to be composition over inheritance. Thinking about this stuff, I actually in doing more research, I came up with this idea of blueprint interpolation. That's not in the guide, and it's not yet implemented, and it may never be implemented. But this is just, I think, to give it another example of a way to approach that generalizable pattern principle. So here, instead of doing duck is animal and flying and swimming, it's duck is animal. It's a blueprint, and then you interpolate in the values of animal, flying, and swimming in. And so that's being able to use the concept of interpolation for a third thing. There's actually, I think, some others that I did not put into this presentation, but blueprint interpolation, and then that also allows for a pretty concise polymorphism override syntax.
Does last one in the list win with overrides?
Yes. Yeah, last one wins. And it has to be the same type. And then the last thing is blueprint varying groups. So, types, custom types have basically like a product. You can have a product relationship or some relationship. Product relationship is an and relationship. So like a person is made up of name and age. Some type is a status is an or relationship. Also, a lot of programming languages call them enums. And so you have status variants, active or inactive or pending. So most languages are not most languages. A lot of languages have these things separately. Rust, I think, is famous for popularizing algebraic types, where you kind of you can have basically a sum of products. You can have in Rust it's an enum, but the enum can contain struct-like data attached to it. So you have a product type, sum type, and then sum of product types. So that last example is with monster variant. It's like, oh, monster variants, here are the different variants of monsters. This is the or relationship between, it's either a goblin or an orc or a troll, and these are the data pieces. And these are the pieces of data that is expected in
You
that
basically extended enums from num type enums or string type enums to object type enums.
Sort of. But this is not my idea. This is a Rust thing.
Okay.
It's my understanding.
Man, everybody only talks about the other things in Rust. That's actually really neat.
Yeah. So also, Enzo takes us a little bit further than the way Rust does stuff. In that, Rust still relies on like an enum and struct key phrase, and I think under the hood they're like probably not exactly the same thing. In Enzo, they are all part of this thing called blueprints, and so the fact that it is a sum type or a product type or a sum of product types is communicated through the structure of the thing, syntax, the way things are presented, not through annotation. So that's another distinction between it and Rust. The last thing is to talk about is copy by value and reference semantics. So in Enzo, everything is copied by value by default. This is different than in some languages. A lot of scripting languages, when you do a primitive, it will be copied by value. But when you do like a more complex memory-intensive object, like an object or an array, then it will be by reference, and that has to do with optimizations. But Enzo does not give a damn about performance, so very stern there. If you do want to do a reference, though, you can do that with an @ sign. So, the example with original above, original copy, when you change copy.1 to 999, that does not change the original. But with ref being set to @original, when you change ref, it also changes original. Because they're pointing to the same, I'm not going to say they're pointing to the same place in memory, because that implies some implementation stuff that I don't actually know.
You can't promise that's actually what it's doing.
Yes, yeah. So that is the conceptual layer.
For all you know, it could be in two different places, and it just guarantees both of them will be updated.
Yes, probably. So then, this can be this @ sigil is it's again an example of a generalizable pattern. It's used for actually stuff that I'm not even going to go into with structuring and loops, because that's this thing's already way too long. But it is, I'll give an example, it's used for doing functions, passing a function reference. So if you want to do higher order functions, you can do that with the @. Most languages, the way they do that is they just have the function name and then they get rid of the parentheses, which I think is kind of implicit. It's easy to miss, especially if you're a beginner. So it makes it really explicit. When you're passing a function as a reference, you have to use the @ symbol. That also gets generalized into how it does. I won't go into that. There's more stuff. It gets used in a lot of stuff.
There you're being like C#. Though it also has out, which is both cool and terrible.
I actually didn't read much about C# in the process of doing this, which surprises me, because I used to be very interested because it's for a lot of game dev stuff.
Yeah, C# basically has reverse references. That's what the out keyword is.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm going to talk real briefly about implementation stuff. So I think first of all, I think it's kind of ironic to be creating a programming language to be more, at least in my opinion and experience, more human readable, since Enzo was implemented by an LLM. LLMs have been trained on Python. I'm not the person dealing with the Python, the LLM is. So in many ways, kind of making this language is very pointless, which is why I say this is an art project. Besides even the lack of proficiency in the the probably implementation and its optimization stuff, it's also just why not just tell the LLM to make stuff?
The next step is to ask the LLM how to actually implement it in LLVM so it's C under the hood and it's lightning fast.
Yeah. We did briefly discuss that. But yeah, so I'm going to go real quick. Also, I just think this is funny. The reason why all this stuff is what it is because Enzo is a language for a human implemented by a machine instead of a language for a machine implemented by a human. All right, so my timeline for working is I started just working in ChatGPT 3.0. I was copying and pasting back entire files or requesting entire files back. This was basically the first project I used LLM assistance for anything outside of just asking questions. When I was taking classes, I specifically turned off a Hub Copilot because I didn't want the thing doing it by itself. I wanted to learn what was actually going on. But with this, yeah, I was like, I'm not going to build an interpreter with the help of, I'm going to try to see if I can make the interpreter. So I started with ChatGPT 3.0, copying and pasting entire files. I started with a Python library called Lark, which is for context-free grammars. I started by just building a REPL and then trying to run REPL scripts to like see if like, oh, I have taken a value and saved it to X, and now if I say X in the REPL, then it will return that value. So kind of started with that. As I continued, I needed to scale things up, so I added a file runner. And then this led to basically the main engine of how this thing works. It's built with a testing harness that I write tests basically, and then I write a golden file that says these are the expected outputs, and then the test harness runs the test, finds what the output is, what the output should have been from a golden file, and then it relays that information as feedback. And then I take that test harness output and I give that to the LLM and I say, make this test work. That's basically how things started going. I would write tests. I would write tests / sometimes I would generate tests. A lot of this, the reason for all this stuff, is because I needed to cover regressions and that kind of thing. And like, it actually ended up accelerating even further the design process of the thing because when you start writing integration tests, like okay, I added this other feature, but I've never actually in writing my docs ever saw how these two features interacted with each other, and so then that would raise some questions. And so I'm generating this stuff. I'm also like designing in the process. And then let's see. Around this time, I also moved to using 4.1 because I found 3.0 kind of had problems staying on task. And I was still at this point requesting patches. So I wasn't like trying to paste in entire things. I was like doing everything by patch, which was really inconvenient. And eventually I used an extension in VS Code to paste in stuff more cleanly. But then eventually I just like moved on to actually using Copilot, and that like made things way easier. I was like literally like going line by line erasing all the plus signs, and that was annoying. So I also was struggling to get over the hump of implementing functions. So I was trying a bunch of experiments with debugging. I was like trying to create a debug log so that it was like consistently writing stuff to a single location, and did like a debug module. Still was having trouble getting over that hump. So then I tried Gemini because I heard it had like really big context windows. I was interested in that. Eventually I decided to ditch Lark because a lot of the problems I was having had to do with having context, which I don't mean that in a machine learning context sense. I mean, it was having trouble, like in a language, you could parse regex that goes like a look ahead. You can't do a look ahead in like in a context-free grammar parser, basically. And you can use Lark to build a context, something that has context, but it has to be like at the evaluator level, and like eventually I was just like, this is not working, so I need context, and the evaluator is supposed to be able to do this. But I was just like, okay, let's build a custom parser, and that took like 2 days. And yeah, just like completely ditched having a library, just making everything custom. That solved some of the problems, but things didn't really take off until I moved to using Claude Sonnet 4. Before that, it was amazing that I got as far as it did, but then once using Claude, it was like rocket fuel. Claude's also like way better at debugging. You can give it a series of you can show it like test output that's like this stuff is failing, and it can like hone in on a specific test and write its own like debug tests, like variations on the test that is failing, and figure out stuff. So that's super useful. And that's pretty much how I implemented Enzo, the interpreter. And now takeaways. So I think it's impressive that this was even possible, I think, but it's also kind of the perfect project for this work. It's text only. I'm not doing any graphical user interface stuff. Don't have to worry about QAing, that kind of thing. It's all text-based. It's a really well-documented and studied problem. It's also endlessly debated on the internet. So it's basically, and also like, it's basically a Potemkin village. Like this is like I said, it's running on a Python runtime. The code is like total spaghetti. The evaluator file is literally like almost 3,000 lines of code that like, I don't know what any of it does. And like I've fixed stuff before, and like, or I've like changed something, an aspect of the syntax, and changing to follow the new expected outcomes will sometimes take multiple iterations because it will have done this. So for instance, one of the things is I switched halfway through to like, instead of stripping out comments on error messages, it would keep the comments. And so it had implemented stripping out comments from error output in like literally 5 or 6 different places. So it took it going through all these other implementation things. So it's total spaghetti, and you wouldn't want to use it for production. But I do have some other takeaways about this idea of like using LLMs for assisting with coding. So I think LLMs should really be thought about as an advance in user interface. So it's kind of like the invention of the IDE or IntelliSense or syntax highlighting. I think you can also probably bring in some extended mind pieces here if you're familiar with that concept, right? So the tools we're using are part of our cognitive process. And I think this is a big deal. And sometimes people will be like, why do you need your code to look pretty? Why does it got to be color coded? Like there's sometimes like you got to use them or whatever, right? So, but I would never actually program if I had to use them all the time. So I think the fact that LLMs provide an additional way of interfacing with code is useful. I am skeptical of vibe coding or agentic AI claims. And the reason why is not because I'm going to say like it can't do this or can't do that. It's more because I think understanding LLMs has improved interfaces reveals the way in which we are accelerating the ability to do things, but the thing that is very difficult to accelerate is the deciding part, which is often what design is most interested in figuring out. There's this tweet. To replace a program with robots, clients will have to accurately describe what they want. We're safe. I wouldn't say necessarily we're safe, but that is kind of the problem, which is not solved by vibe coding. Making stuff is, the implementation can be a problem, it can be difficult, but the most important problem is orientation. And, what does this thing even do? Who does it serve? Does it serve anybody? Why this path instead of another? LLMs can generate and extend and simulate, but they don't define. And, in classical Greek terms, this would be called telos, goal, right? And this isn't getting into like consciousness or AGI debates. This is because I would recommend reading this guy named Alistair McIntyre. He's a philosopher of ethics, and basically his argument is, telos is socially mediated. It's built into the horizon of all the people who are the stakeholders of the product. And so there's endless languages online. You can go online and everybody's always doing this. There's these communities online where people are making stuff. Everybody's making, all these people are making stuff because, it's a creative outlet, kind of very much what my interest in this kind of stuff was. But like, those languages are being used by anybody. And that's kind of the thing, again, why I put this as an art project is, how do you make something that people use? How do you figure out like, how do you make the decisions about what the kinds of things people need are? And that's still very hard, and I don't think we have figured that out yet. But, Q&A.
Well, first, that was delightful, so thank you for that. I think this off and I'll hand it around, but so that I don't think we have a lot of people watching at the moment, but just in case they are, so they can hear questions. I think my first 2 questions I'll have for you, which is, so I guess you echo a lot of my own sentiments as a developer on the role that LLMs have to play. I almost find myself in a REPL loop with that interface, but I'm still the driver, as it were. So it sounds like you definitely, though, have strong opinions that Claude is the closest to being any kind of viable platform for vibe coding, and it sounds like you have a much better real use case than shit posters on Twitter. And but the real thing I want to ask you is that the part I thought was most fascinating is that essentially almost a way to force them to not hallucinate is to combine it with test-driven development, where it's just like, until these tests pass, it's not right, LLM, keep iterating until they pass. I thought that fascinating. Like, did you Did you explore even asking the LLM to maybe try to build tooling to automate the test-driven development loop so that like you don't have to babysit it and it's just like you're not done writing code till all these pass?
Yeah, so first of all, that is definitely an engineer's approach, which I think is not a bad one. That would have like automated the process. You have to remember, I'm the guy who was erasing the plus signs manually, so I was like, I'm just trying to make this thing.
Because I was like, that actually might solve some of the
Right.
hallucination problems because you anchor it to a real objective thing.
Yeah. But also part of the reason why I didn't pursue that very strongly is because I didn't trust it to do that stuff. I was like, it's gonna do something weird. And I was actually surprised by how rarely it tried to change the test, but there were a couple times where it did, where it was literally like, okay, so like this test isn't passing and I need to make it pass. I'll just change the test so that it gets the same output as like
classic student
yeah,
cheating.
yes, yeah. So that I felt like it was a thing that I had to keep an eye on. So yeah.
Okay, let's see. Let's get some other questions. I probably have a few. Who's got questions? All right, I see one there.
Enzo. Who is Enzo? And
Enzo?
inspired you?
I just say Enzo's from Reboot, which is
Oh wow.
Enzo's from Reboot, which is like a first animated children's cartoon, like 1995 or something. So you know.
And now that I know that's what it was, mad respect. For anybody who hasn't seen it, it's basically Tron for kids, and it's amazing. Let's see, who else has got some questions for Enzo? Or Aslan, I should say.
I would love to hear your philosophy on the future of programming languages. I reflect often about how Andrew Karpathy said the hottest new programming language is English. And I think it's moving more to that way. Coming from a design standpoint, what do you think? I mean, you're iterating on the programming language, which is the realm of the engineer, the human speaking computer. Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, so to summarize for those online, is English the new programming language? Which, and if you'd asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said you're nuts and I'm not going to talk to you. But now?
I think it is a little overhyped, just because I'm really skeptical of how much this stuff. I guess I would put it this way. It seems to me like already a pretty freaking huge leap. Like people are like, I can't program a thing correctly all the way through it. Like, yeah, but it could do a lot of stuff. It makes my life easier. Like I really look at it as just like I think it's like IntelliSense or you know syntax highlighting. It's like it makes the process easier. I'm a little skeptical of like how far stuff can go on its own. So yeah, I don't know.
English is imprecise.
Yes.
And I'll always give it that.
Yeah, like, I actually didn't mention this. Part of the, like, doing research, I sent an article I wrote about this thing to a friend, and he actually sent me this, there's a language called the plain language, programming language, and it is, it's actually like, maybe I should bring up a little picture of it or something, I don't know. Anyway, look it up. It, like, is meant to be, like, actual looks. It just looks like English sentences, but it does have discrete, like, programming, like, stuff that glues stuff together. So, but I actually find it kind of hard to read that and understand it because I feel like trying to ape actual English is like not, you know, programming languages are meant to be precise. Like you're talking about like logical structures. So having like a slightly more formalized language, I think is helpful for that. But then, of course, that quote is really talking about like whether or not LLMs are going to become the primary interface for programming. So, you know, like I think Python and JavaScript and all that stuff is obviously, you know, I think people are going to still have to engage probably with that stuff to some degree, but I think it's going to definitely help.
You know, I guess just the thought I quickly have on that is that, you know, interestingly enough, yes, English is very imprecise, but actually one thing insight I've gained into as I've slowly been teaching myself French is actually, because you start realizing this when you start learning a foreign language, English is actually a lot more precise than you realize it is. You don't notice it because of your mastery of it, because what you actually think of as imprecision, and this may get to why Aslan doesn't like it, is actually symbol overloading. English has symbol overloading out the wazoo. Like, actually, the word set in like the Oxford English Dictionary literally has 200 definitions. And so, but it even extends to like very basic grammar words, like have is not actually the same grammatical construct in certain different sentences. You think it is, but it actually isn't. You just never notice it. Like, I think the thing that hit it most home to me in French is that French is very explicit about the subjunctive. And initially I was like sort of struggling with it because I was like, this doesn't exist in English. And then actually I had a light bulb. It does. We just don't notice it because we don't conjugate verbs in the subjunctive. We use the same conjugation. But it absolutely exists in English. You just didn't notice. So that's one thing I thought. And I guess also the other thing I'll say just with my own experiments with vibe coding, I think to me a lot of it is it's not going to do our work for us, but it is going to let us work a lot faster. Like to give an example of something that I was able to do with it that was really nice was, so my VPN that I use, because I've not yet gone far enough down the rabbit hole to completely run my own, so I'm still using something like Proton, and because they're infamous for feature incompleteness, on the Linux desktop client, it does not support split tunneling, which if you're a remote work developer like me and need to connect to AWS, is hell. And so it's like, I want my VPN, but I'm not going to always remember to switch it on and off while I'm working, basically. So it'd really be nice if I could somehow implement split tunneling. So I went to ChatGPT and was like, hey, how could I homebrew my own split tunneling? And it basically wrote me a shell script to modify my IP config table for me. I could have written that shell script myself, and maybe because I am a professional developer, unlike the boat Aslan saying, I do know what every line in that shell script does, but I would have had to waste a couple days writing this thing. I had a working split tunneling script in 30 minutes with an LLM, getting me 95% of the way there, and then I just needed to tweak where it was being stupid, basically. Now, is it 100% secure? Probably not. Proton hires smarter people than me. I still think it's staggering that I was able to do something that would have even taken somebody trained like me a couple days to work out all the kinks. I could get it done in 30 minutes. So that's my own, where I see a lot of this stuff going. It's not going to replace us, but this way, the anecdotes you keep hearing of oh, now one senior dev, they're not going to hire any junior devs, just the senior dev is now expected to be 4 devs, I can say I'm kind of living that. So yes, that's what's happening.
Can I add on to that? I think also your example demonstrates you knew what split tunneling was, you knew what these technical things are, and that's kind of where I think the term vibe coding is very inaccurate because a lot of this, I would not call this vibe coding personally. This is LLM assisted programming. I guess it's a pretty large amount of code is generated, but there is the structure that I set up with the test-driven stuff. I have a friend named Mark who did a talk recently for Austin Remix, which is a React kind of organization, and they built stuff, and there's a whole, it's almost like DevOps or something, except you're having to set up oh, this file has this list of rules of this is the libraries that we're using, et cetera, et cetera. There's all this pre-prompting stuff that goes in to making these things set up. I use the test harness to output and golden files in order to guide the process. So I think that's kind of different than vibe coding. The concept of you're going to type in a prompt and get a full app out. I think I started with that. That's how I tested the idea of maybe doing the interpreter. Is I went to V0 and I said, here's this document, try to make an interpreter inside of a React app that's gives me an idea what a REPL would look like for this thing. It was able to do a thing, but when you look at it, you actually look at the code, it's all just a bunch of regexes and stuff. And that's certainly regexing is part of what the parser is doing, but it was oh, this is not, so.
Yeah, and I guess just final springboard on that, I'll just say that yeah, I think that's right. While Aslan and I have we like to have philosophy debates, and we don't 100% agree on the concept of telos, but I do absolutely agree with Aslan that a human being has to set out with a goal in mind of what do I want to build, and the LLM literally doesn't have that. Maybe if people actually started trying to invent a long-term memory for it, we might see some weird emergent property, but currently it has no sense of goals or continuing goals beyond when it role plays because it's been told by people to role play. And
it's going through it does not have a special context to define shared understanding of goals.
Right.
There is some kind of thing that's going between you and the user, and OpenAI is a corporate organization. They're definitely the LLM is being stored towards their goals.
Oh yes, I had a very fascinating ethics conversation with ChatGPT recently where I was just wow, this thing really is a sociopath. I'll tell you more later. But I guess the final thing I would just say on that is that yeah, at the end of the day, the tweet is glib, but I do think there's a lot of truth to and for those of us, myself included, who have been up coding till 2 in the morning crying they can't get a feature working, yes, implementation is hard, but it is actually still the easy part compared to what we should build. The how is relatively easy compared to the what, and I'm literally living right now where like, we're gonna have to reiterate on a feature because we all went over the acceptance criteria, all the stakeholders, we agreed on language of it will be accepted when it does this, and then finally the product owner gets the ready for production thing, sits down with it and is like, this is returning incorrect data. And then I was like, is it? And then I was like, I don't think there's a bug here. And then so then I kind of was like, I think there's not a bug because look, here's the language we agreed on. And then I walked her through logically. You see that if this is how it's supposed to work, this data you don't want actually fulfills the criteria and should be returned. And to her immense credit, she's like, oh wow, actually I think you're right. I think I didn't think of that and we miscommunicated. So like the issue was not how to build it, we built it, but we didn't actually build what was actually needed, even though we all thought we did. That remains the hard part. Yeah, we've had that here. Who else has some questions? It's fine if they don't, but anybody else? I never mind wrapping up early, but always we attract such interesting people. I always want to get everyone's questions in. Do you have any final thoughts for us, Aslan?
Yeah. I'm doing the same with Austin 2 tour, so I'll be handing out stuff afterwards. If you want to come see art stuff, my house is open, and Saturday and Sundays, 12 to 6.
Also, does Open Austin have anything fun coming up we should all know?
Oh yeah, I should talk about that. Open Austin has an event, actually. I think it's tomorrow. We have an event tomorrow. Let me check where it is.
Ew, man. And I talked a little bit about them for those of you who don't know. Open Austin has been around in Austin a long time, at least 15 years. They're basically remnants of Code for America Brigade, and been doing lots of really awesome stuff in the civic activism space for a really long time. Like they're the people who are going to go, hey, here's the APIs the city of Austin gives the public. What are some cool tools we can use?
Also, Open Austin was actually around before Code for America. So started by Corley as a data privacy.
I did not know Whirly was actually the original.
Yeah, I learned this
That is
very
fascinating.
recently. Yeah. So Austin Community College Rio Grande campus, in room 1212. Open Austin's going to be doing a thing for that.
Do we have another question?
Oh, I just wanted to say that was amended.
The open Austin location was amended to the triangle.
Okay. The triangle. And also, I'm selling shirts. So if anybody wants a cool shirt, I got like art shirts over there for sale. So.
Yeah, and I think the designs are made with AI. Is that correct?
Neural networks.
Neural networks. Okay.
I gotta be extra pretentious.
I know, exactly. Gotta get it right. All right, well, if we don't have any final questions, I want to thank everybody for coming, and let's give Aslan one more round of applause, because whether, I think if the world was only filled with practical things, it would be a very boring world, and I think what Aslan made is delightful, and I look forward to where he might take it from here. I'm actually serious, Aslan, you should now get it to be implemented in C. Your speed concerns would then be fixed, because you might have a very interesting syntax there people would actually like. But yeah, thank you all for coming as always. We'll be here in December, second Tuesday, talk with Dr. Kuipers about AI and ethics. Do not miss it. We'll also probably have some kind of holiday party in December. I may not get that fully announced till after Thanksgiving because work is busy, but potentially stay tuned for that. Also, if any of you like our work and want to support it, we've made it a lot easier for you to donate. We've got a few handy QR codes that you can donate if you want to. We even support recurring donations if you would like to make us sustainable because web hosting and Meetup are not free, so every little bit helps. Thank you. We'll probably go hang out downstairs in the hotel lobby bar and hang out for a little bit, so join us if you're free. Otherwise, we'll see you next month. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You got a message board or something I can post this on?
Oh, and if you need parking validation, I have it. Come see me.
I didn't get that.
How late did everyone stay there?
We talked around 6. good to see you again.
Good to see you too. How are you doing today?
Doing great.
Lindsay.
Lindsay, that's right. Yeah. Good to see you. Doing well. Doing well. Glad to see this. He reached out on Instagram and told me that you're I'll be there. Yeah.
So you're also in like the UX field then?
I was a front-end engineer for a long time.
Okay.
I'm out of the game now, but
Gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, I did it for a long time, so I'm
Like interested in it. And,
always.
Yeah.
Always, yeah. And I have been wanting to actually get back into coding a bit more for fun.
Yeah.
Like what Aslan's doing with this.
Yeah.
I did it for work for so long. Like,
You're like burned out.
I got really burned out actually. In 2020, I got so burned out. Like I didn't want anything to do with code. I was just like, I think the stresses of life and just also kind of being burnt out on the work that I was doing kind of like added on.
Gave you a bad feeling, didn't
It did.
That year,
It did.
that you imprinted negatively on coding.
Honestly, I think you're exactly describing what it is. To the point where, like, I have tried to sit down to code, and I almost get like anxiety looking at it, and I think it's for that exact reason. Like, not even kidding. I think I just like it was a dark time, and I just made an association that like kind of killed it for me. But it doesn't need to be that way. That's the association that I put on it, you know.
Everyone these days very thankful to have a job in the state of the world, but
The last 6 months of my last job in 2020 were just like very hard times. All my team got laid off except for me. 80 people at one time. I was the only one. And I had this like survivorship guilt, is that what they call it? Yeah. Because I was like, you know, like all these people had families and stuff like that. And the only reason they kept me was for a very weird reason. I had switched just to another team, just kind of like for no reason. And how's it going?
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
Good to see you, man.
I like
Thanks for the
the
invite.
thing. That's cool.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm actually gonna be taking a shot at. So this is all print on demand. I'm
Okay,
gonna take a
yeah.
shot at doing weave on demand
Oh.
because there's a jacquard. You get 4 colors and you can just upload an image and it'll automatically create a
That's cool.
thing. Yeah.
That's
So
it was
cool.
just getting dangerous.
Yeah, Jacquard was the loom guy.
Yes,
you're
yeah.
talking about. Okay.
yeah, that's how I found it because I was like, if I can do print on demand, it should like a jacquard on demand service, and there is.
There is?
Yeah.
Are they in the U.S.?
I doubt it.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's like $40. I was like, that's not bad.
$40 for a shirt or
Yeah,
for
for getting the sweater, yeah.
Probably
not much thicker than
and just everybody, so we say the terms of the
Yeah.
venue, make sure you've picked up your stuff.
This was here beforehand.
Okay, and I think the person who this was is left, so I'll take care of it. But yeah, make sure, leave your chair, how you found it, because I get a little talking to you if it's too messy.
I love that. That's what machines should be.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
humans are doing way too much robot work for way too long.
People don't emphasize that enough.
I agree.
It's all of the more it's almost as though for all the things that you do, totally meaning or we've all been,
I love it. What's very funny is, of course, the instant I had a little more time, I wasn't stressing. I found it funny.